than the previous crisis to test deterrence. And this was unprecedented, but the way the crisis was diffused by third-party intervention followed a well-rehearsed path that mimicked the past. Pakistan saw its kinetic response in crisis to have demonstrated that conventional deterrence worked, as it prevented India from escalating to an even bigger conflict and thwarted India's effort to expand the space for conventional war under the nuclear overhang. Now, the explosion earlier this week in New Delhi has again raised tensions and triggered speculation about whether another crisis might be in the offing. Pakistan has put its forces on high alert, as officials obviously don't want to take chances with an Indian leadership smarting from its base setback and wanting to avenge that. However, the international environment is far from being permissive for any Indian military action against Pakistan. Islam must strengthen ties with the US, India strained ties with Washington, China's unflinching diplomatic and military support for Pakistan, and Pakistan's Saudi strategic mutual defense pact have reshaped the geostrategic landscape to New Delhi's disadvantage. So the outlook for India-Pakistan relations remains troubled, with no war, no peace situation prevailing, and there is no dialogue of diplomatic interaction, and the ever-present danger of another crisis. And of course, Islam still has to figure out how to deal with India's suspension of the Indus water treaty, which over time will pose an existential threat to Pakistan and its security. Has many foreign policy challenges to negotiate and navigate. But I want to end by saying that the factors that will shape Pakistan's destiny lie within it, not outside the country. It is a choice that it makes on domestic issues, especially economic reform, that will determine its future, and of course the effectiveness of its diplomacy. Because, as I said before, all foreign policy begins at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lodhi, for your insightful remarks, and a very happy birthday to her all the way from DC. Now, on to the time you all have been waiting for. Soon, our first public health panel will begin in the social room, titled Floods, Fevers, and Fatalities, Public Health Challenges in Pakistan's Climate Emergency. This space, on the other hand, will host the first public policy panel titled Political Economy, Sick Man of the Global South, Is Pakistan Future Ready? We recommend you all to float in between panels, but please keep your voices low and maintain decorum throughout the day. It's going to be quite the event, so enjoy it, and thank you, guys.
I'm so sorry.
The Zoom is on, and he's there.
Can you log back in for me? So what happened was when you logged in, when you logged in, you opened the audio so that way it was
Okay, you want me to go out?
yeah, so log out and log back in really fast.
Man, give me a second, I'll call you back. Can you hear me if I talk to you?
You keep yourself muted.
And then up this audios. Okay.
Yes, I don't have
Sorry, stop. What are we doing?
just log back in.
Right, do you want me to say anything about the live streaming or not? Nothing, right? Okay, this might be now.
I must know that this might be.
I'm not gonna say anything. Middle of the day.
Don't connect to audio, right?
Yeah.
Right, scale and
I'm making that now.
but virus solutions we don't have to. अच्छा लोगों को पता चल गया कि क्या होगा. Yeah, for now, yeah.
Now we want everyone to see me.
In a second, once you introduce the panel and the monitor, then you show the screen for the Mifta, Junaid, and all those people, okay?
Everyone.
Yeah. That's fine. That's good. Excuse me. We're going to start in a second. I would request you all to settle down. We're going to start our panel, Political Economy, in this great room. The public health panels are going to take place on that side, on the room at the corner. Thank you.
हाँ करो. Fine. Anyway, we can push the laptop a little further back so that we can create some space for this because this just has to stay here now. Or would that just be too messy? Because when the previous guy was using, he was like clicking on the button, and I don't want that. He was like shifting the slides.
That's fine.
Board is taped up right here, so it's not gonna.
What is this camera doing?
So.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Just to remind everyone real quick that the social room where the public health policies will be held is right at the back. So our ushers will guide you over there, but feel free to go over there now. Give them a minute. No panelists? Everyone's on. Can we have them? Okay, fine. Hello, everyone. Please settle down. We're about to start the panel in this room. Can everyone who's staying for the public policy panel please settle down? And just a reminder that if you're headed to the public health panel, they will be held in the social room. And we're just about to start in another minute or so. Okay, amazing. I think we're going to start now. So, Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. My name is Maria Masan, and I'm a sophomore in the College of Arts and Sciences here at Georgetown studying government. And I'm so excited to welcome you all to our first public policy panel of the day, Political Economy, Sick Man of the Global South, Is Pakistan Future Ready? This panel will be moderated by Uzair Yunus, who is the Chief Product Officer at the Asia Group. And before we begin, I'm going to read out Georgetown's speech and expression policy so that this can be a conducive and engaging environment for everyone. It's important to note that Georgetown University is committed to standards promoting speech and expression that foster the maximum exchange of ideas and opinions. While it is recognized that not everyone may share the same views as the speaker, it is expected that everyone in attendance respects the right of the speaker to share his or her perspective and ideas by not causing a disruption to the event's activities. Thank you all for contributing to a constructive and meaningful experience. I also just want to remind everyone that we do encourage people to move between the public health and public policy panels, but while that is happening and a speaker is speaking, please be mindful that our mics are quite sensitive and they pick up sound really quickly, so please be as quiet as possible while doing so. And without further ado, I'm honored to kick us off for the day with our first public policy panel.
Test one. Okay, there we go. Welcome, everybody. My name is Uzair Yunus, and I'll be moderating this panel conversation, which is a bit more, I won't use the term hybrid because it evokes the wrong types of memories or emotions from a lot of us who are part of the Pakistani and Pakistani American diaspora. So let's call it a tech forward panel with Junaid Iqbal joining us along with Miftah Ismail. And I know at some point Taimur Jhagra will join us as well. So I'll begin with introductions. First to my right, my dear friend Kulsum Lakhani. I call her the OG investor in Pakistan with real skin in the game in the tech and startup ecosystem. I won't say how far back in time we've known each other because it's been a lot of ups and downs through Kulsum's journey as an investor. She's co-founder and general partner at I2I Ventures and is Pakistan's first female VC founder as well. So Kulsum will be sharing her thoughts on the tech ecosystem. Joining us online is Junaid Iqbal, part of the Kareem Mafia. And I would say the most lovable shark in Shark Tank Pakistan as well. So Junaid is founder and CEO of Salt Ventures and also a dear friend. And if you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, Pakistan and Counting, do check it out. It has very fantastic stories on Pakistan's economy, what's wrong and what's right, and what the opportunities are. Joining us also online is Miftah Ismail, my Maiman brother from another mother from Karachi. Dr. Miftah Ismail is the former Federal Minister of Finance in Pakistan and also a business leader in the country. So we'll be picking his brain on more of the policy side of things and what works and what doesn't work. And then last but not least is Taimur Salim Jhagra Saab, former Provincial Minister for Health and Finance, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. I think he will join us in just a moment as well. And unfortunately, he and Miftah and Junaid could not join us in person due to various reasons, including the fact, and I would point this out, given that this is something that many of us in the audience and in the diaspora care about when it comes to democracy and freedom of expression and speech, that Mr. Jhagra could not join us because he's on the exit control list of Pakistan and was denied the right to travel to the United States by the government of Pakistan, which is a shame as well. In terms of this conversation, as I alluded to in the bios, we have two folks, Kulsum and Junaid, who have deployed risk capital in Pakistan. And when many of us talk about opportunities in Pakistan and what is and isn't working, we kind of miss the fact that there are a lot of people who have risk capital in the country and real skin in the game. So we'll pick their brains on what works and what needs to happen more of in the country. And we have two folks on the policy side who've both tried to change things and understand both the capacity constraints as well as the ways in which elite capture and kleptocracy stymies reforms and the reforms process in the country, regardless of who's in power at a particular point in time. And the goal is basically to help you understand why people continue to invest risk capital and what are the headwinds in the country that perhaps if we do less of that, the wrong things, then perhaps the aspirations and ambitions of Pakistan's 240 plus million people, majority of whom are under 35, can help Pakistan become an entrepreneurship-led growth society as well. So let's begin with you, Kulsoom, first. You've been investing and working with founders and entrepreneurs in Pakistan for years, and you've seen ups and downs, including the boom time of the COVID era, the sudden collapse of certain startups as well in Pakistan. Tell us about where things are, where do you see them going, and what's working in the country?
Sure. How many people here are familiar with the Pakistani startup space and VC, venture capital? Okay, good to know, because I don't want to just throw acronyms at you. I'm just going to break things down a little bit more. So as Uzair mentioned, and I'm really honored to be here, especially part of this panel. My name is Kulsoom. I'm the co-founder and general partner of IDI Ventures. We're an early stage venture capital fund for Pakistan, which means that we invest, as Uzair mentioned, risk capital in some of the earliest technology companies in Pakistan. And as he mentioned, I've been operating in the Pakistani startup space for years before that. Since really the early days, for the last 15 years of supporting entrepreneurs, connecting them to local angel investors, incubating, accelerating, building out research of what's happening. So I've kind of had this bird's eye view, but also very front row seat of building the startup space. And so to give you guys a sense of what's happening, all of you guys use apps here to whatever degree, whether it's Uber, whatever we're using, right? And Pakistan has really been at that precipice of, obviously opportunity and potential. And we were, as a startup ecosystem, in terms of entrepreneurs that were building technology solutions or technology-driven solutions to solve some of the largest problems in the country. We were growing at like a pretty steady pace in terms of trajectory. In 2020, Pakistani startups raised about $65 million in funding. And then in 2021, what basically happened in the world is that interest rates went down, venture capital activity, because of the pandemic, all of a sudden people didn't have to travel to Pakistan to feel like they could invest there. So we saw a huge amount of international venture capital money flow to a lot of emerging markets, but especially, a lot of it was flowing to Pakistan at the time. And so what we saw happen was that in 2020, Pakistani startups raised $65 million in capital. 2021, that was 350 million, so 5.5x of that. 2022 stayed at about 355 million. And then what started happening was that there was, a global slowdown from a macro standpoint, and we saw interest rates go back up. A lot of that tourist VC activity started to dry up. We had a couple of big, as Uzair kind of alluded to, a couple of companies that in Pakistan raised a lot of capital, but couldn't, continue to raise, so went belly up. But what was happening was that we saw that those numbers come down, right? So in 2024, Pakistani startups raised about $48 million in capital. But then what we're starting to see is it's growing back up again, right? So this year to date, startups have raised about $63 million, which is actually more than what we raised last year. So we're starting to see that increase happen. And what I think is happening from a macro standpoint, right, which I think this panel is important for that reason, is that there's still all the problems that we're facing Pakistan are all opportunities that are there to solve. And if anything, those opportunities are even bigger right now, right? And with things like RAST, which is our instant payment interoperability infrastructure, going online and going live, we're going to see payments take place a lot more. We're seeing people become part of the formal tax net. So we're seeing a lot of solutions that are being driven towards that. Obviously, Junaid, who's there, is part of Greem in their early days, and we saw like a huge amount of things happen when Greem was acquired by Uber, of a lot of those people that were part of that acquisition then launching companies in Pakistan. So we're seeing a huge amount of opportunity, especially in the fintech space. As an investor, I've been an investor since 2019, really late 2019, now 2020. And in the last 5 years, we've deployed about $7 million in capital into now 13 active companies, mostly in the financial technology space. But we've seen opportunities really come up everywhere. But I think you typically see in emerging markets a triangle that typically tends to happen, where we see as consumption increases, purchasing power increases, which right now will hopefully increase as inflation is going going down and stabilizing, we're starting to see this triangle of e-commerce, logistics, and fintech really come up as sectors in this space. And we've really invested in that as a fund, but we're also seeing that really become a lot more sophisticated. We're seeing fintech companies that are now raising not just equity, but also debt, which is really necessary as they grow their businesses. We're seeing a lot of companies in Pakistan grow to the Middle East, including a company in our portfolio, Abhi, which is now both in Pakistan. It acquired Finca Microfinance Bank and has now become a neobank in Pakistan, but has also grown to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So we're seeing like these growing from Pakistan outwards, growing people that players that are outside of Pakistan, like InDrive, Yango, not only entering Pakistan, but also investing in startups in Pakistan. So we're looking at outside in. And then we're looking at like how people can actually build from Pakistan for the world, right? These software plays and things that we're seeing elsewhere. So I think as much as it's been, I've been through the ups and downs of everything over the last 15 years, I think we're really seeing if we're part of a J curve, we're still kind of at the lower part of it, but I think there's an opportunity to really think about how we're going up from here.
Thanks for that overview, Kulsum. And I think one of the missed stories, and also in DC, in particular the West, is Pakistan's technology ecosystem on the software side, right? Like, as somebody who's hired Pakistani talent myself for some of this stuff, people often here think about India, Philippines, maybe even Ukraine for that talent. But as somebody who's worked with Pakistani talent, not only is it cheaper, but it's also better in terms of a lot of quality. And you can find as somebody who's trying to get access to talent, a lot of interesting talent out of Pakistan, just because the competition or a lot of people's focus is in there. So that's, again, an opportunity. But bringing you in, Junaid, in terms of the conversation here, you are somebody who has been an investor. You've scaled up the businesses in Pakistan a lot, starting with Kareem. You've been a shark and have seen the entrepreneurial spirit of Pakistan's young men and women in particular. And for those of you in the audience who haven't watched Shark Tank Pakistan, I would encourage you to go on YouTube and check out the creative ways in which Pakistani young men and women are building businesses across all sorts of ventures, from mining investments to foods to composting, etc. So, Junaid, from your perspective, what does the West and DC in particular miss about what's going on in Pakistan's economy? And where do you see opportunities? Because obviously you've covered a bunch of them on Pakistan and counting. So help us understand your perspective on where things are and where they're headed in terms of Pakistan's entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Hello, everyone. Good to see some so many friends here. Thank you very much, Uzair, and to the organizers.
Maybe just pause for 1 second. We're trying to figure out your audio.
You can't hear me? Wait.
Yeah, I know.
Can you hear me now?
No. Might have just 1 second.
Now, is it any better?
Yeah, there we go.
All right. It's working. So thank you, Zaid, for that question. Now, it's when you look at Pakistan from a macro lens, of course, you're going to look at the big picture numbers that we look at, the twin deficits, all sorts of problems with the energy sector, high cost of taxation, MNCs leaving Pakistan, so on and so forth. But to really get a sense of what is happening on ground, one has to. The only way to get a fair sense is to follow the capital. Where is money flowing? And for the sake of today, I wanted to explore 4 lenses. The first lens is, where are the large traditional capital allocators, the traditional industrial groups, the exporters? Where are they reinvesting their capital? So over the last 5 to 10 years, one interesting phenomena is that the large groups, whether it's your Nishats of the world or Luckies of the world, are not reinvesting in export-led businesses. The bulk of their investments in the last 5 to 10 years have been more retail-oriented. Nishat has invested in hotels, malls, dairy. They've brought in an auto assembler. Same thing. Lucky has done something very similar. Malls, dairy. They've brought in Kia. You look at Sapphire, they're getting into agriculture services, and so on and so forth. Al-Karam is building an entire value chain for shrimp farming. So on one end, there is signaling from large business groups that they're kind of done trying to walk this uphill battle trying to be competitive in exports in an environment where taxation and energy are really stacked up against you. So capital is reallocating and it's finding its place in areas which are more friendly towards a cash economy, which we are, a consumption economy, which we are. So much of this type of spend gets supported by remittances, which are growing. Official remittances are up, unofficial remittances are also up. The second way to look at it, and I know Miftah Bhai will speak about it later, so I'll keep it very brief. According to various estimates, about 30 to 50 gigawatts of solar capacity has been imported into Pakistan over the last sort of 5 years. And this is not part of an energy reform. This is almost a revolution that is happening on its own, where people have invested anywhere from 150 to 200 billion dollars over the last so many years across the world, from the poorest to the largest industrial group, to go from like 55, 57 rupee per unit electricity to 12 to 18 rupee incremental electricity. And what this does is, Miftah Bhai will speak more about it, but people are investing in lower cost energy, and that itself brings about a productivity boost to the economy. And there is a whole downstream industry which is starting to develop, whether it's EV bikes. I know Kulsum is also invested in that space to further electrification of homes as we reduce the availability of natural gas, as we increase the price of natural gas. Home electrification in terms of geysers, stoves, all of this is starting to happen. So there is a massive electrification opportunity that we're seeing and people are investing in. The third lens, and I guess this is something that a lot of us who invest in finance, capital markets, or in the VC space, we completely miss. And I think Shark Tank helped me open my eyes to this, is the rise of the SME consumer brands. And you are seeing this emergence of local brands. If any of you are in Pakistan, next time go to a Kiryana store or even a slightly bigger store like an H. Kareem Baksh or a Springs in Karachi, and you will see snacks, cheese, olives, mushrooms, protein bars, cosmetics, children's clothing, footwear, home essentials, all of it starting to be produced in Pakistan. And you're seeing how the packaging, the quality is going up season by season. And MNC pullback could be a reason. The post-COVID supply chain disruptions are a reason. The import curbs are a reason that we had in place. Gaza-related product boycotts are a reason. And then because of TikTok and Instagram and third-party logistics company, which Kulsum spoke about, the barriers to entry have gone down for these companies and they're really able to grow fast. So this is an interesting space. There are three challenges here. One, financing is not available. 85% of money, banks as balance sheets are going to the government. These businesses are still very afraid of coming completely into the fold of taxation, because the moment they sign up and take an oath to be good corporate citizens, there is a 40% net tax burden. This is, however, a great space for micro PE firms to come in. The government can really incentivize this space. There is double tax on private equity funds right now. I don't know why. We need to remove that. We need to come up with an SME policy, and this whole segment is starting to emerge. And lastly, we are seeing quite a bit of focus coming back to agriculture. It's 24% of economy, about 37% of the population workforce is part of agriculture. So you're seeing large companies building agriculture services firms. There are agriculture lending platforms that are starting to emerge. We have taken away the support prices for some of the major crops, so people are starting to look into some high value crops. And very importantly, in our neighborhood, the GCC has become very serious about its food security post COVID, and regionalization of their food supplies is very important to them. So there are a lot of transactions that are starting to happen. Some happen on a government to establishment level, so they're not being reported, but there are private sector opportunities emerging as well. If you were to sum this up, is all of this happening as a result of this well-designed policy? No, this is capital finding its way in an economy where it's hard to be in sectors which are energy intensive. It's hard to be in sectors which are completely under the spotlight of the taxman. So capital and effort is moving away from that. And that's the beauty of capitalism. And that's the space where people are building now.
Thank you for that overview, Junaid. So let's bring in Miftah on this, right? Because we've heard, Miftah, from Kulsum and Junaid that there are opportunities, there are developments that are exciting to those who are deploying capital. Capital is finding its way into these emerging sectors despite policy headwinds and despite what people in Islamabad are putting up in the way of roadblocks, which Islamabad I often refer to as 10 kilometers outside of Pakistan proper. And it's people live in a whole different world compared to the rest of Pakistan. But Miftah, if I sort of draw your attention to something Junaid talked about, right, which is energy and the issues around energy. And energy, in my view, energy policy is industrial policy. Without energy policy being figured out in Pakistan, you cannot do a lot of what we would like to be seen be see happening in Pakistan. And so that energy policy crisis is leading to a solar revolution. But from your perspective, where are we in the broader energy policy space? And help us understand and help the audience understand this two-tier sort of revolution happening in the energy space in Pakistan, where on the one hand, you have lack of reforms and IMF mandated price and tariff increases that are pushing people to complain about the rising cost of energy. But then at the same time, this whole dynamic, particularly as it relates to the investment China has made in solar panels and batteries, leading to declining costs of solar energy and battery energy storage in Pakistan and providing an alternative. So help us understand what's going on in the energy sector.
Thank you, Uzair. And hello, everyone in the audience. A special shout out to my son, Umar Farooq. If he's sitting in the audience, I hope he is. He's a sophomore there. Uzair, let me just come to your question in half a minute. Let me just summarize, I think, in a way, what Junaid was saying. In a country as big as Pakistan, 250 million people, trading with the world, you can always pick out examples of good things happening. The point is that whatever good is happening in Pakistan is not because of a government-produced conducive environment. It is almost exclusively happening in spite of the government. The government is not really helping the cause. And the reason really is this Pakistani government has become dysfunctional. Now, every country in the world has problems. You know, rich countries like America, Japan, Germany, I mean, all these countries have problems. But other countries try to solve their problems. We just recount this problem. You and I spoke about this session before, and you said that, you know, we know all of these problems. We've been talking about this for over a decade. Energy is one of those issues. But since our government has become dysfunctional and slowly the dysfunctionality is increasing, so now for the last 3-4 years, you're seeing that the per capita GDP in Pakistan is actually going down. Average Pakistani is actually getting poorer in the last 3 years. Since the beginning of this century, really, you know, we've been losing out to India and Bangladesh in terms of their GDP growth. You know, they're growing faster than we are. But in the last 3 years, we're actually, you know, losing out to ourselves. We're actually, you know, going into negative growth. And I don't really see anything at all in this government or any other government which is trying to address these fundamental issues that are faced, that Pakistanis face. You know, we talk about 45% people being under the poverty level, given the World Bank's, you know, poverty line, or 20%, and every year in poor people increasing, the number of poor increasing. This is not really a sustainable model for governance in Pakistan. Under this backdrop, you have an energy policy in Pakistan where the government is a single buyer of power from independent power producers and some of its own production, and the government is a single distributor of electricity. Now, one reason we study in economics that the government should be doing this is because what we call power sector to be a natural monopoly, that it is a decreasing cost industry. And so distribution is cheaper when it's done by a single entity as opposed to multiple players competing against each other. And so the government should be able to provide you cheaper electricity than you should be able to make it yourself, or small competing firms are able to provide you in the market. And yet what is happening is that the government is charging you 45, 50, 55 rupees per unit of electricity, per kilowatt of electricity, whereas you can make this own electricity out of solar power for maybe 18 rupees a kilowatt hour, or you can make this electricity if you are a factory, especially in Sindh where the wind is pretty good, you can make this for 12 to 13 rupees a kilowatt hour. So what is the logic of government, owning these distribution companies and power, in power generation companies? And we've seen over the years that these power companies, independent power producers as they're called, they've been set up without competitive bidding. They've been set up with ridiculously high dollar-based discount rates without thinking about what would happen in the future. They've been set up without thinking through the external viability of these projects, so that you have in 2013 to 18, for instance, you set up a lot of these power projects with the help of Chinese government, the Chinese CPAC loans, and each of the power projects by itself was viable. Each of this was feasible, absolutely, in Pakistani rupees. But if you do all of them together and then you convert them, rupee requirement into dollars, you just didn't have enough dollars. And because your power is so expensive, because your government is so expensive, and that's why the taxes are so high. So that the tax rate today, I will say to Junaid that the tax rate on my company is 61%. After the dividend is paid to me, we have to pay 61 cents on every dollar. We have the highest energy cost compared to Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. And I say these countries because actually I have done these comparisons, but also because when a foreign investor is thinking of investing in Pakistan, these are other countries that person can invest in, including South Asian countries. And if you're more expensive, your gas is more expensive than all of these countries, your electricity is more expensive than all of these countries, then you'll obviously not get investments in Pakistan. So, but there has been no policy to address this. Now, one day I heard the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Shehbaz Sharif, say that he was very happy that 6,000 megawatts of solar power has been imported into Pakistan. A week later, I saw an article in Financial Times by some British journalists quoting Chinese sources that 23,000 megawatts of power had come into Pakistan. So then former Prime Minister Shahid Abbasi called me and said, Miftah, can you check if this number is correct? So I called people in FBR. I mean, this is a few months back, a year back maybe. I was still in the opposition, but I called a few people in FBR and I said, have you imported 23,000 megawatts of solar power? And he said, I don't know, but then we figured out what is the price of it. And then we saw because FBR deals with dollars and cents, not in kilowatt hours. So then we figured out that indeed 24,000 megawatts of solar power has been imported. And now that number has reached to, I think, 35 gigawatt hours or 35,000 megawatt hours, which means that about 7,000 megawatts of power has been supplied to the grid. Now, what is the problem in Pakistan? Problem in Pakistan is that 70% of the electricity that the grid companies sell, that the power companies sell, go to people who buy at less than 200 units a month, okay? And those are heavily subsidized. So then the other 30% people who are buying the 30% power, they have to pay a lot more to subsidize the first 70% of the people, because the 30% are more affluent. That includes industry, that includes commercial connections and whatnot. Now, when the solar is coming and you are selling power to these affluent consumers at 40 rupees, 50 rupees a kilowatt hour, they are switching to solar power at 16, 17, 18 rupees a kilowatt hour. So you are losing your best customers. And during the daytime now, I mean, if you go to Islamabad, Lahore, or Karachi, and in the nicer neighborhoods or more expensive neighborhoods, you see every rooftop has solar. In the poorer areas, in the villages, you see that, they will have one or two solar panels, during the day. So the government of Pakistan did not anticipate. But what was the reaction? When they saw that so much solar has come, they decided not to buy solar for the grid. They decided to decrease the rate of solar at which they were buying. They were not trying to accommodate at the new reality. They were just trying to say, look, we have set up more power than we can sell. We have set up more expensive power than we can sell. That's why we will force you to buy more expensive power from us. We will not let you buy solar at a cheaper price. And so when Junaid says that, Nishat and Sapphire and Al-Karam and Tabba and Lucky Group and all are moving away from exports, and they are, because they can't compete with the rest of the world. Our exports are actually, in the first 4 months of this year, exports of goods that are on a declining trend. They are going to, agriculture farming, which is tax-free. And they're going to other things because, you're not allowed to take your dollars out of Pakistan. So the Pakistani rupee has to remain in Pakistan. So they have to invest their capital somehow. They've invested in real estate. They've invested in stock market and done well. They buy government paper and then they buy this, other businesses, which don't force them to compete with the rest of the world. But this is not how to run an energy policy. We have not seen a serious effort to privatize these companies. We Pakistanis today consume about 60% of the powers that a typical Indian citizen does. We're not so poor, but why are we not consuming enough power? Because our power policy is wrong. Let me just end this by giving you this example. We have the same powers pricing structure that we have had in 2012, 2013, when our capacity was half of our demand at that price. Today, our capacity is 50% more than our demand, but we have the same power structure so that if you buy the first 100 units, you will get less than 9, you will pay only 9 rupees per unit. If you buy the 101st unit, then the whole 100 units would then now be sold to you at 15 rupees per unit. So the marginal cost of that 101st unit is 600 rupees or so. And you're still trying to limit the use of power by the very poorest people who suffer, and their utility goes down, their satisfaction or happiness goes down because they're not able to consume the power that they need. I know poor people who don't run, if their refrigerators 24 hours a day, they will shut off after 8 hours because they don't want to go over the 200 units limit. There has been no thinking that, let's rethink the power policy. Let's rethink the tariff policies. Let's not cross-subsidize so much that our best consumers will leave. Let's try to privatize so that the variable cost of 18 rupees doesn't translate into a total cost of 40 rupees. But there has been nothing. And even today, the government is thinking about new power projects. God knows why. We just did a nuclear power project some time ago. And there is absolutely no coherent policy to deal with power and gas. I have to give you one last example. It's not just the government of Pakistan that makes mistakes. Your neighbors in IMF also make fundamental mistakes. They forced the government of Pakistan to increase the price of gas because, again, the idea was that we will increase the price of gas. So all those people who were producing, all those industries who were producing electricity from the gas, and which is called captive power in Pakistan, they will be forced to buy more expensive energy from the grid, more expensive electricity from the grid. I kept telling these guys, the government of Pakistan leaders, that look, nobody will go back to the grid. People who you make the gas expensive will go to biomass, they will go to solar, they will go to wind, they will not go to electricity. But obviously the IMF had dictated that and they increased the cost of gas. So Pakistan now has the most expensive gas, 4,500 rupees per kilowatt, which is about per MMBTU, which is about $16, $17 per MMBTU, even though they import LNG for less than $8, but they're selling it for $17. What's happened? What happened is that gas consumption went down. So people who were paying you more for gas to able to subsidize domestic consumption, they left the grid, but power consumption has not gone up. People have gone to alternate means, to solar and to wind and all that. Again, serious policy mistake. But the IMF doesn't really have to worry about the consequence of this. The government of Pakistan's bureaucrats and policymakers and politicians don't have to worry about the consequences of this. Pakistani industrialists have to worry about the consequences. And more importantly, Pakistani labor has to worry about the consequences who are not getting jobs. So that's why we have the highest unemployment, more than 20% we've had in a long time. So this is really, Pakistan is not future ready, to take the example, to take the topic of this thing, because we are not current ready. We are not ready even for the present. We are not making policies, logical, rational policies to make us ready for the rest of the world, to compete with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that masterful explanation of the energy sector woes in Pakistan. And to use your gas example, for those of you who don't follow and aren't Miftah and many of us in this panel on issues, Pakistan currently has excess gas, but still has gas load shedding. That is the irony of ironies in the country. Like winter is here, you will start hearing headlines in the news about no gas in the stove. And that there's no gas in the stove because the pricing issue, as Miftah was alluding to, is ridiculous. But at the same time, if you read Business Recorder or the business pages of Dawn, you will also realize that there is excess gas in the system. So it does not make any sense whatsoever, and that's a policy issue that Miftah was getting at as well. Jagraj Saab, welcome to the conversation as well. Over to you now. You've been Health and Finance Minister in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and many and Pakistan. Okay, are we back? Yeah. So we talk about Pakistan and we sort of issues around Karachi and Karachi's businessmen, Punjab, so to speak, in Islamabad. We rarely talk about issues related to what's going on in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa beyond the security issue as well. So I want to bring you in and help us understand where are things in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa right now from the perspective of the economy. What is the government of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa working on in terms of making its youth future ready? And where do you see the macro challenges, building on what Miftah talked about, that limit the aspirations of citizens in Pakistan, particularly young men and women in provinces like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa? You may want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Zaid. Thank you, everyone over there and everyone in the audience listening intently. And apologies that I couldn't be there because it seems that our immigration policy is not yet future ready. But just to pick up on the discussion, right? I do want to just contribute a couple of points in terms of trying to answer the overall question. And I think if there's one thing that listening to the discussion that I would actually try and suggest to everyone is that Pakistan may not be future ready in terms of its, and it may actually have a case at the moment to be the sick economy of the global south, or even the sick political ecosystem of one of the sick political ecosystems of the global south. But if there's a silver lining, right, that silver lining for me would be to tell everyone, including in particular Pakistanis outside Pakistan, I see a couple of examples on the panel, of investing in the people of Pakistan, right? Or of investing in the youth of Pakistan, because there's 250 million of them. And that's a lot of people, right? And it may be true that they deserve a lot better than they get. But what is also true is that many of them break through the barriers that are put before them in terms of achieving something. I think if we want to do that more and more, and this is true of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I'll get to some of the specific issues, but this is also true in general, right? I think we do need to answer a few questions once and for all that actually determine the economic direction of Pakistan. And while Miftah and I can talk about that more openly, maybe Junaid has to be a little bit more circumspect Maybe some of your other panels need to be a little bit more circumspect. I don't think there's anything wrong in actually putting those questions across. The first one is, right, really, can we decide once and for all whether we're an open market economy or not, right? Whether we actually want to believe that the Pakistan's path to growth or to solving its sickness is investment and competition. Because we heard Junaid say here that if you take many of the big business houses, they're not investing in Pakistan today, right? I think linked to your question on Pakhtunkhwa, can we also once and for all decide, right, the economic implications of federalism, of the fact that if there's 4 federating units, and each one of those, one way or another, is placed on an international border, right? So these are not small provinces or states. Pakhtunkhwa borders Afghanistan, Balochistan borders Afghanistan and Iran and the sea. Sindh borders India and the sea, and Punjab, of course, shares the longest border with India that we have. But we all know that if you actually look at Pakistan's trade volumes in absolute quantum, Pakistan is one of the countries, right, that actually does the least amount of trade, not just in terms of with its neighbors, which is also true, but also globally, right? How do we fix that? And if we're not going to fix that without understanding the economic implications of federalism, and by that I mean, if you take Pakhtunkhwa as an example, then the state has to understand that Pakhtunkhwa can have 2 competitive advantages. One is the low cost of energy, but the cost of energy is not only distorted, it's equalized across this very large country. And because it's equalized, while Pakistan now has an excess of gas, and while a lot of that gas resides in Pakhtunkhwa, certainly more than enough for domestic consumption, despite having a constitutional guarantee, we can't exercise our right over that gas to be able to offer it to Miftah or other industrialists. Similarly, if you look at energy, if you look at some of the legacy energy projects, right, I think that you would find that in Pakhtunkhwa, not only to business, but also to domestic consumers, if we were able to have a differentiated pricing of energy, we'd be able to offer that. And if we could offer that, not only would that give us a comparative advantage in terms of business, it would also, by allowing for cheaper energy to domestic consumers, make Pakhtunkhwa a more attractive place to live, right? Because outside Peshawar today, you simply don't have access to electricity. In the same way that we have excess gas, but gas cuts or gas load shedding, as we call it, we have excess power, excess electricity, but we have massive amounts of electricity load shedding across the entire country, except for 3 major urban centers, Islamabad, Karachi, and Lahore, right? So do we understand the implications of federalism? Because if we could do this, we would also then think of a different trade policy with respect to Afghanistan and Central Asia, and that could potentially be the comparative advantage for Pakhtunkhwa, right? Because we're not going to otherwise become a center of industry for domestic consumption in Pakistan, because we're not the population center of Pakistan, right? We can't do very much about that, because Pakistan isn't run like that. We say we're a federation in name, and with the 27th Amendment and everything that's happening, I mean, we have bigger issues than economic federalism, but economic federalism, or the lack of it, stops us from actually developing. And I think the third question is, right, if we actually going to believe in an open market philosophy, if we actually going to believe in economic federalism within the country so that every region can leverage its comparative advantage, right? Are we prepared to put the enablers in place, right? Because I think a lot of the challenges that we face are linked to those enablers or the lack of them. You already talked about the energy challenge, so I won't expand on that. But the lack of availability of energy and the high cost of energy not only becomes a disincentive to business, it also becomes a disincentive to the quality of life that you can actually lead in most of Pakistan, and compound some of our other issues indirectly in that sense. For example, security. I think, are we willing to fix that? Similarly, are we willing to fix the engine that actually decides and implement policy? That's the civil service. And I will just get to that when I give you a couple of examples from my time in Pakhtunkhwa. Are we willing to fix policy continuity? And I promise you, policy continuity is not fixed by hammering the constitution and fixing 10 years for everyone for 10 years. And are we willing to do stuff like innovate on education? Because ultimately it goes back to what I say, the biggest resource we have in our people, and the only thing that I can actually really pitch to the two people in the room who live outside Pakistan but have wallets and are willing to invest in Pakistan is the quality of our manpower, right? And so are we willing to invest and innovate in education? Because of so many of the other factors that we talked about, our education system is so talented that we have great people, but we have a lot more people with the potential of being great who are straitjacketed by an education system that is somewhere out of the 19th century, in particular the higher education system. Now, just getting to Pakhtunkhwa, right? I think Pakhtunkhwa is an embodiment of the exact same challenges and opportunities that I just talked about, except as you said, Uzair, we heard less, right? But I think the biggest potential advantage that we have, again, is our people. And while you may not talk about it, I think literally anywhere there's a Pakistani community, there will be a Pashtun community, and there'll be a Pashtun community because Pashtuns tend to be entrepreneurial. I was in Berkeley, where my daughter studies, earlier on this year, and randomly going to a petrol pump, right? The gentleman happened to be from Pakhtunkhwa, recognized me. We had a really nice chat. They invited me for dinner. And that story repeats itself anywhere I go. I was in Berlin last year for the World Health Summit, and literally in one of the main squares, a delivery boy ran into me. He was delivering a pizza to someone, and he happened to be from my constituency, right? Now, we send all of these people abroad. They contribute to the country way more than any industry does, or all of industry does collectively in terms of the money they send back. But how much do we really invest in them? And I think the biggest silver lining here indeed is the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But if we actually talk of how much money goes into venture capital in Pakistan, it is still exceptionally low. And with all of the barriers that we have put in over the last couple of years, and perhaps the biggest barrier is to stop people from being able to give feedback to the system. I mean, if you try and give feedback to the system, it appears what happens is the sort of thing that happens to me, where you end up not being able to exit the country. Now, I can still give the same message to you on Zoom. I don't know why policymakers don't understand that, right? But that does end up being a barrier. And the sort of policies that we've put in place in terms of taxation, in terms of limitations on freedom of speech, in terms of not working on the meritocracy available to young people, we actually stop them, or stop many of the best of them from wanting to access opportunities in Pakistan, which means there's lesser investable opportunity than there should be. I think even with all of this, a lot is possible. And I think anyone else who's actually talked to you about their experience, I'm sure Miftah will agree, is that big things are possible, but to do them, my experience in government was you have to end up being very hands-on, you have to end up being very detailed, and you have to end up almost driving to an enormous amount of detail any sort of change to be able to actually facilitate, right, a more liberal economic environment. I'll give you a specific example of that. This, I think, goes back to 2018-19, and the person involved on the other side of that engagement is actually one of our co-panelists, Junaid, who was the CEO of Careem in Pakistan, if I remember, at that time. And they were struggling with the transport department on trying to put in place a regulatory regime that actually facilitated growth for the mobility industry at that time that was relatively nascent and consisted of Careem and Uber. And I remember some fascinating discussions with the bureaucrats in the room that happened at the time. They wanted to put in place a draconian tax regime on them, which was already in place in Punjab and other provinces. They wanted them to have big yellow stickers inside and outside the car, saying that every driver who drove a Careem or Uber, right, should advertise that they're actually a taxi driver. There was a social stigma attached to this at the time. And I remember telling them, is your job to try and promote this industry, or is your job to try and actually stop them? Because if you're trying to stop them from investing, you're doing a great job. And I said, unless you're trying to make billions of rupees, right, from the sales tax that Careem drivers pay, which I don't think you're going to make, we need to try and get out of the way with sensible but as minimal regulation as possible. And it's interesting, I wasn't the transport minister, but it's interesting that Junaid used to come to me rather than to the bureaucrats in the room, and I needed to do something that was not in my job description to try and make this change happen at the time, which solved two particular needs for us. One was it created jobs. Two, it actually solved a mobility gap that the public transport system didn't necessarily fill in the way that it should. I think we succeeded to a certain extent. I think some of the other provinces that followed us. But to make this happen, the lesson that I learned was I had to step out of my job description, and the people whose job it was to advise me in doing this were so horribly uneducated for this, right, that I literally had to fight with them to make this happen. This is true every time we effected big change. Whether it was to change the pension regime, whether it was to say, for example, that universal health insurance was doable, and if we could waste ₹1 billion on a traditional hospital that didn't deliver, putting the same ₹1 billion in health insurance that delivered to 100x more patients was a better use of money. And that money, with the service being facilitated by private sector hospitals, actually created the investment for, created the environment for greater investment in the health sector, and that private hospitals were not the enemy over here. That's the sort of barrier that I ran into again and again to be able to make something happen. And if we're going to change this, we can have these conversations, but we want Junaid and the likes of Junaid, right, to invest 100 times more money than they are in Pakistan. And that will not happen with the current environment. That will not happen with the current set of economic policies in place. That will not happen with the current set of political policies in place. Last comment, and this is just another interesting anecdote of another potential area in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in which we had 3 very good years, and that was tourism. And I met one of the investors in the hotel industry at the time because we were looking to outsource our guest houses and some of the hotel properties that government owned. And this gentleman, who had a background at Goldman Sachs, was opening up small to medium-sized properties in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the rest of the country. And I met him, and I asked him what he felt, whether he would potentially consider the fact that we were actually outsourcing many properties, right? And I asked him what the secret of his success was. And his reply was that the secret to his success was staying as far away from government as possible. And I think that remains even more true today, and that is something that we need to change if we need to change the title of your panel in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagra Saab, for your comments. And I would add one thing, because Miftah's on the line. Perhaps it's also taking on the bureaucracy, but also being willing to go to jail for trying to do things that are done the right way. Because Miftah here on the call paid a heavy personal price for some of the energy sector reforms that he and Shahid Khaqan Abbasi at that time pushed through that were then politicized, and the price was jail. So we have to be careful about that as well. I have 5 more minutes according to our organizers. So there are mics here and folks can ask questions. Please keep them brief. We have just 5 more minutes, so maybe a couple of questions, and I'll try to direct them to one of our panelists and make sure that they also crisply share the answers.
Mike's here.
Mike's here. Mike's here as well.
Mike's here.
Okay.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you all so much for this very insightful remarks. My name is Mehlaka Samdani, and I think that one of the core issues perhaps were not discussed, and that is the entrenched military authoritarianism in Pakistan that we see. And I'm just wondering what impact that has on investment, either with startups or the larger business sector. We saw just in 2024 that the military and intelligence agencies, in collusion with the civilian government, in trying to crack down on civil society, shut down the internet that cost the Pakistani economy $1.62 billion. Also, the arbitrary freezing of bank accounts, the freedom of movement being restricted, as we just saw with Jagra Sahab. So I'm just wondering if you could attend to and address that question. Thank you.
On the internet, you want to take it, Kusum?
We're gonna bunch questions together.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
I just had that for Kulsoom, because I think if the other speakers in Pakistan respond to that question, they might get picked up or abducted.
Hello. I was curious to ask you, which do you think there will be a unicorn in Pakistan? Like, which first one do you think will actually break that record? And also, can you talk about IPO markets in Pakistan? The stock market is not good. I mean, 14% of GDP only. How can you better the investor confidence?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to ask about, other than investments, other concrete solutions to address the immense brain drain that is happening in Pakistan. I mean, I think I saw that over 2 million people left Pakistan in the last 3 years. So other than investments, what other solutions are there?
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, assalamu alaikum, everyone. My question is about a particular industry that we don't hear about. It's connected to waste management. Why isn't that something like that happening in Pakistan, where you can take our waste and create energy, or export the waste to countries that can use it to create energy? Thank you.
Last question. Please direct your question.
Assalamu alaikum. This question's for Junaid Iqbal, as well as Kulsoom. For Pakistanis here who want to get plugged in to the ecosystem domestically, what are institutions like incubators or other organizations that we can tie into?
Thank you. That's it.
All right.
You can take the questions.
So let's start with Kulsoom. Unicorn, investments, and internet freedoms.
Freedom. I mean, we've we've both have talked about this a lot in terms of internet freedom. I've spoken and advocated for this, and I think you mentioned it's the value of also not living in Pakistan. So I actually have the privilege of being courageous in some ways that some of my colleagues may not have the same privilege to. And so, you know, I'm part of the Venture Capital Association of Pakistan. We're kind of this advocacy group that's a bit fledgling. There's only about 6 VC funds operating in the market. And for us, when things like the internet shutdown happened, when crackdowns were going on, we all had to write statements and really push for behind the scenes for changes in that, because obviously that acts as an obstacle, one of the many obstacles that happen, and it obviously hurts commerce hugely. I think more than anything, beyond the fact that, like, I think the thing is that startups always find a way around things. I think that's why we actually have, I genuinely believe that Pakistani entrepreneurs are some of the most resilient entrepreneurs in the world because of how we have to literally navigate some of these major challenges. I think what I try to advocate and communicate to people is that this isn't just, this might be a short-term, there might be a short-term security reason why this is happening, or sharks are eating cables, which was like some of the major reasons for it. But while that might be there's a short-term reason behind it, it actually hurts investor confidence, at least outside of Pakistan, inwards, in the medium and long term, and even in the short term, right? And so we can't really afford that as a market. I think everyone, because Pakistan is seen as so risky, people are looking at ways to mitigate that risk on a regular basis. And when we have things that are draconian laws, internet shutdowns, all of that, all it does is hurt the risk profile that's already quite high about the market. And so I think that's a major issue.
Can I do a quick
Yes.
two-finger on this, because it's related to freedoms as well. It's an act called the Pakistan Electronic Crimes Act, passed in 2016, amended by the government in 2018, and then further amended by this regime and tightened even more. Kulsoom and I and Junaid have talked about this at length. No general counsel worth their weight in an international company will allow sophisticated technology work allow it to happen in Pakistan with the existence of this law. You can Google that law, you can read about that law. It's not a super long law, but it gives widespread authority to regulators and investigators in Pakistan to take away source code, to take away technology hardware. And no general counsel at any large technology company or an outsourcer will allow that to happen or take that risk. So it's related to the draconian laws as well. And in some of these things, whether it's internet shutdown or building the technologies around shutting down the internet, or laws like PECA 2016, unfortunately, every successive government since 2016 has played their role in some of this as well. But go ahead.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions, and I also want to make sure that our panelists outside can answer some of this, especially Junaid on the next question. When it comes to unicorns and IPOs, someone asked that question. You did. Great question. For those who don't know what a unicorn is a billion-dollar valued company, right? And obviously we've had a lot of billion-dollar companies in other emerging markets, particularly India and China, where we've seen a lot happen in the last 15, 20 years, right? Where we've seen an instance of not just unicorns really kind of being concentrated in Silicon Valley in the US, but being distributed to other emerging markets. I think you have to kind of work backwards on why those unicorns even exist to begin with. And it really speaks to kind of the broader ecosystem that needs to also continue to develop in Pakistan, where we need, right now, there is some early stage capital that exists for companies that are raising early financing. But in order for a company to raise, later stage financing, right? So that's Series A, Series B. So that's really what happens when you become a unicorn, right? You continue to raise capital, or eventually you get valued at a certain amount. Oftentimes what we've seen is Pakistani companies will have to grow outside of the market in order to be able to do that. So a company in our portfolio right now, Abhi, which I mentioned earlier, which is a fintech, acquired a microfinance bank in Pakistan, are doing really well. But in order for them to raise now hopefully their Series B, they've now grown to Saudi Arabia, the UAE. And so I think what we will see is unicorns come out of the market, but they probably won't be Pakistan only. They'll likely be Pakistan plus, which, I mean, maybe Junaid can also comment on as well. That's just my personal belief. I would love to see a Pakistan only play really become that unicorn, but it really does require risk capital coming in at growth stages in the market. And from an exit perspective in terms of IPOs, I agree with you. I don't think a local IPO will necessarily be the most attractive way for an exit to happen for a company at this point, but we will see acquisitions. There is consolidation activity happening in the market right now where players, because of the capital scarcity, are acquiring each other or merging with each other in order to be able to hack growth and be able to grow faster. But I think what we will see is outside players wanting to enter Pakistan, and rather than do it by entering themselves, looking at potentially acquiring a local player. We did see a few of those instances attempt to happen. We saw Papara acquire SadaPay, a Turkish player, but obviously then they had a lot of issues of their own. But I think we will see that with like now InDrive investing in Crave Mart, which is a quick commerce play. Hopefully that'll lead to something that's even bigger in the future. We're seeing Yango invest in the market. So seeing some of these corporate venture capital plays that are happening might lead to exits in the future.
Okay. Going to the audience, maybe Brain Drain, Miftah, 30 seconds to you, and then Taimur to you, and then maybe Junaid, you can talk about some of the waste management stuff, because I know you've looked into that sector.
Was there 2 more minutes? Yeah. Thank you.
Let me just answer the young lady who asked the effect of military on investments in Pakistan. Look, you don't necessarily need democracy to grow. We've seen a lot of countries in the Middle East and Southeast Asia that grow really rapidly in spite of not having democracy. But you need predictive outcomes. You know, when judges are not neutral arbiters of decisions of issues, when you can change laws, constitution on a whim, and then policies change frequently, then you don't necessarily have predictive outcomes. And when you don't have predictive outcomes, you will not get capital. One reason when we talk about, Kulsum talks about Pakistan only, what do you call it? Icons. Pakistan only unicorns. Not happening is because people are not willing to risk so much capital in Pakistan. So you need predictive outcomes. You need a stable regime, a policy regime. And if you can change this on a whim, then people are shy. That's the first point I wanted to make. What was the question? I forget.
Let's go to Taimur Saab for Brain Drain, Taimur. You're on mute. Your mic's on mute on your Zoom, Taimur.
Yeah, as far as brain drain is concerned, if you give Pakistanis room to breathe, you will solve brain drain. At that point, people will go out, they will come back, and many people will stay in. But we can't be as suffocating a culture as we are right now. And in particular, over the last 25 years, ironically, since General Musharraf's time, right, Pakistanis have had that room to breathe and express themselves, even if not perfectly. And as far as the military's role in politics is concerned, 100% agree with Miftah. If you're going to create an environment where any entities, that includes the military, that includes big business, can make profit through the barriers to entry that rigging the system gives them, right? That will create blocks on the amount of capital that will come in, because people will not trust, right, that they have fair opportunity. And that is also precisely why all the sort of Pakistan associated unicorns that we talk about come out of Dubai and come out of Silicon Valley and not out of Pakistan.
Junaid, last 30 seconds to you. You get the last word on composting waste management, because I know that was a startup on Shark Tank too.
Well, on energy, creating more power capacity, the answer is simple. We already have a grid of 45 gigawatts. We barely use 50% of that in the winter. It even drops lower. But I want to very quickly comment on the unicorn question. So if you look at technology-related startups, the purchasing price in Pakistan is very low. If you look at ride hailing, a ride in Pakistan is 60 cents. In Saudi Arabia, it's $6. In Dubai, it's $20 per ride. Same tech stack being used. So, 60% of Pakistan economy is services industries, which essentially are where people get employed. 24 million kids are out of school. if education and health levels are not improving, your per capita income is not going up, and the level of services you're offering in the service industry is not going up, so your purchasing power is down. On the other side, come to the main street businesses. There probably are unicorns in the real estate space, right? A Beria town probably was a unicorn in its own way, but these are not taxed. The numbers are not available. And then to the last question about IPOs. So the moment you register yourself as a company, you will pay 18% sales tax, you will pay 29% income tax, you will pay your employees, and they will get taxed at up to 29%. If you decide to then go and list, you will people who will buy your shares will pay 20% capital gains tax, and on top they will pay a 15% dividend tax. If you want to become a group of companies, if you dare to ever aspire to create a conglomerate, and you have one listed company and then you have another listed company that owns the underlying listed company, you will get taxed 3 times. So your effective tax rate will come to 65%. So the formal services sector, the former industrial sector, and the salary class sector is in a complete chokehold, whereas the unicorns are probably roaming around free. We don't even know about them. Even probably they don't know that they're unicorns, and they're in the real estate space, which has been funded by black untaxed money for the last 70 years. And that's if you look at the stock market, traditionally the only companies which were billion-dollar market capitalization and above were your oil and gas development companies. Outside of the stock market, it was your 2 or 3 telcos by default, by the virtue of the investments they put. They were unicorns. Finally, you have Mizan Bank and UBL, which have gotten unicorn status. But other than that, till we make the environment easy, we're not going to get unicorns.
All right. Thank you, Junaid, for that. And I think thank you all for following through on this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to our panelists, especially those that stayed up late. And we'll go on to the next session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I know we're over time, and I don't think 60 minutes can do justice to the expertise of these panelists. But we're going to move on to the next one. Mariam is going to announce it, and I would ask you all to just stay calm, stay silent, and please maintain the decorum. Thank you.
Before we start the next panel, I just want to remind everyone that we do encourage everyone to move between this room and the social room. So please feel free to go to the public health panels as well. And we'll start another 2 minutes. So if everyone could just settle down really quickly, that would be great. And if the panelists for the next panel can also start coming up to the stage. Slide, no? I'm putting them. Hi, everyone. Please start settling down now. We're about to begin. Can all the panelists for this panel please come to the stage? Right, analysts. Bucky.
Hello. Hi. We're looking for Adil Najam, big 6'2" genius from Boston University, the moderator of the next panel. Can you please send him in? Here he is. Thank you.
Sorry, darling, I'm going to ask you this. No, I'm going to say that I just need to, actually, no, this is fine. Oh, just put my stuff. Trying to figure it out, like the butta and everything. Hi, Sandy.
Come to me, not first. Catch my breath.
Of course, अभी वो लोग invoke आए हैं। आपके पास काफी टाइम होगा तो catch your breath.
Start with someone else, because I was just doing it.
अभी वो लोग introductions वगैरह कर रहे हैं, तो मैं आपके but I do want to start. Okay. You know,
Please start settling down, everyone. We'll be starting in 1 minute.
Round that were already announced way over, so I don't know whether that's gonna.
We're just getting water.
They are getting water though.
Okay, are you guys all good to start? Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're going to be starting this panel now. My name is Mariam. I'm a sophomore in the college at Georgetown, and I'm so honored to be introducing our next public policy panel, which is Developing Human Capital, Pakistani Disruptors and Pioneers Here and There. This panel will be moderated by Melika Samdani, who is a human rights advocate and the executive director at Community Alliance for Peace and Justice. And before we begin, I'm going to read out Georgetown's speech and expression policy so that this can be a conducive and engaging environment for everyone here. It's important to note that Georgetown University is committed to standards promoting speech and expression that foster the maximum exchange of ideas and opinions. While it is recognized that not everyone may share the same views as the speaker, it is expected that everyone in attendance respects the right of the speaker to share their perspectives and ideas by not causing a disruption to this event's activities. And I also just want to thank everyone for making this such a meaningful environment for everyone. And I just want to remind everyone that we do encourage movement between the two public policy and public health panels, but while you're doing so, please be mindful of the speakers and be as quiet as possible because our mics are very sensitive. And without further ado, I'm so excited to start off this panel. So take it away, Melika.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Good morning. I would like to start off by saying how incredibly impressed I am with Mariam and all of the other students who've been such an integral part of this conference. Yes, they do need a round of applause. They've been so efficient, so organized, and so professional in the way they've handled the logistics, in the way they've handled all of us, and everything else that comes with putting together a conference with more than 40 speakers. So it's really, really commendable. And it's also very inspiring for us to see the next generation of Pakistani Americans take such a strong interest in Pakistan's future. You inspire us to keep going. And we really hope that this incredible panel that we have here today will also inspire a lot of people here in this audience. I have a quick story. Earlier this year in April, Wajahat, Amna Khilji, and the students at Yale had put together a very similar conference on Pakistan's future. And I was moderating a panel with human rights lawyers and judges who'd made great inroads in advancing the rule of law. and justice and human rights. And so we had a wonderful discussion. The students really engaged well with the panelists. And, you know, we all went home. We thought we had a great conference. And then just 2 weeks ago, I was at another event, and this young woman came up to me and said, "May I please give you a hug?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, I had no idea who she was, but I said, "Sure." And then she said that the panel that I attended at Yale changed the trajectory of my life, because I had at that point no idea what I was going to do. But then I attended it. I was inspired by the speakers. I started interning with one of the human rights lawyers, and now I've just applied to law school, and I know exactly what I want to do with my life. So that basically, it was a lovely moment, and it really reinforced the importance of having these conversations. So now I'm going to turn to our panel today. These are incredible trailblazers for Pakistani Americans who decided to go beyond the traditional Desi career paths that we're kind of accustomed to. So they decided not to be doctors, not to be engineers, but really carve out influential roles within their respective fields in journalism, in environmental policy, academia, politics, and public policy. So with that, I'm going to very briefly introduce them. First of all, we have Dr. Adil Najam, who really does not need any introduction. He serves as the president of WWF International and as Dean Emeritus and professor at the Frederick Pardee School of Global Studies at Boston University. He is a global public policy scholar whose teaching, research, and public engagement focuses on international environment and conservation policy, with a particular emphasis on climate change and global governance. Next, we have Dr. Sadaf Jaffer. She is an associate research scholar and lecturer at Princeton University, where she teaches courses on South Asian, Islamic, and Asian American studies. In January of 2019, she shattered glass ceilings as the first South Asian American woman to serve as mayor in New Jersey and the first Muslim woman mayor of a municipality in the US. Next, we have Sahar Habib Ghazi. She is a multimedia journalist and community builder who recently served as South Asia editor for Vice World News. Sahar has led newsrooms at Global Voices as managing editor, reported for the New York Times, and produced for Geo TV and Dawn News TV in Pakistan. Last but not least, we have Shazmina Khan. She is a foreign policy advocate who most recently served as the Islamic Scholarship Fund's 2024 Congressional Policy Fellow, serving in the office of Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. She holds a master's in global governance and diplomacy from the University of Oxford and a bachelor's in global affairs from Yale University. Thank you all so much for joining us today. So before we begin, I would just like to say that these are incredible disruptors, right? Because in their particular fields, they have continued to challenge stereotypes, challenge the dominant narrative, and challenge the discourse. As you listen to them today, I would encourage the rest of us to think about how in our professional or personal lives, we can also be disruptors. Because in this moment in history, where we have all collectively witnessed a genocide in Palestine, in the Sudan, where we have seen the very systematic erosion of democratic norms and principles in this country, where in Pakistan, we have seen military authoritarianism entrench itself like never before and perpetrate the worst kinds of human rights violations, where we are going through an existential threat when it comes to the climate crisis, we can no longer afford to be sitting on the sidelines and watching. We all have the obligation to become disruptors. So over the next 40 minutes, I'm just going to ask our speakers a series of questions, and then hopefully we'll have enough time for audience Q&A. I will encourage our speakers to maybe limit their responses to maybe 5 minutes, and so that we have some time for audience participation. So Dr. Najam, let me turn to you first. Not because you're a guy, but because you're the oldest among us. Yes. So you have your career basically took you from academia in Pakistan and the US to a leading global institution like WWF, right? Focusing on climate change and environmental policy. Can you share how your presence in this space allowed you to shape the global South's perspective, or you were able to put forward the global South's perspective, and if at all there was any challenges in the way representation affected policy, or you were able to translate that into policy?
That's okay. I can use my classroom voice. Thank you, Malika, and I must say that I'm delighted to be at this conference, but especially delighted to be in your panel because we haven't seen each other for
20-some years.
20-some years. We were together at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy when I was teaching there. So thank you for having me. I feel like a bit of an imposter because I do not think I deserve to be sitting. I don't think I deserve. Thank you. I don't think I deserve to be sitting with all these wonderful people. I'm not sure I'm a disruptor. And actually, I have a resistance to the word that I will come.
Adil, don't hold your mic from the bottom. Hold it from the shaft. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. So I say that with some seriousness, but thank you for thinking of me as such. And the reason I say this, I'll put my main point right at the beginning. I think disruption happens when you are not trying. I actually get very worried by people who go out wanting to disrupt. ये IT वाला जो game खेल रहे हैं कोई अच्छी नहीं है. Disruption is not a good thing. When you're trying to do it. What I mean by that is, I think that's anarchy. So there's a difference between anarchists and disruptors. I know how you're using it, and I like that. But I did want to make that point that I think the people who are honest disruptors, real disruptors, who really change the world, don't go out to change the world. They go out to do what they think is right, and they go out to do it as best as they can. And the world changes. And so I do get worried, especially aajkal, telling a lot of young people your job is to go out and disrupt. And what they do is they make people's job disappear. Right? I have AI, which essentially I will take many people and kill their jobs or something like that. So that's a serious point, but I'll come to that. But I am, as I said, I am honored to be here, but I really don't think of myself as a disruptor. Or the other word you used is stereotypes, right? People who destroy stereotypes. तो यार मैं तो सबसे बड़ा stereotype हूँ. मुझसे ज़्यादा तो stereotype कोई पैदा ही नहीं हुआ. Right? Our parents said become doctor or engineer. I became both. Right? Now the doctor I became, I can't do any good for anyone. It was the PhD wala doctor. Or engineering, my first 3 degrees are still engineering. So I started as a civil engineer, and then when I came to MIT and I was studying environment, my father, bless his soul, never ever told us what to do, but he would always ask me, "Tum kar kya rahe ho?" And I would try to explain it to him, and I could see the disappointment. And so I went and got another engineering degree, and he was so happy, and it was the best things I could do for him. But the point I'm making is really that the story is, the reason I think I'm not doing anything different is I'm doing the most obvious, common thing to do. I am a teacher. That's all I am. And everything else just happens on the way. So the story of my life is that I was 5 years old, and my parents left me in school. And no one has come to pick me up yet. So I just keep moving from one school to the other. I have now done every possible job you can do at an educational institution. From being actually a janitor's assistant, to being a teacher, to being a professor, to being a vice chancellor, to being a dean, and so on and so forth. But that is really the point of the disruption. So the WWF is not a distraction from teaching. It comes because in my research and my teaching, I was able to convey a certain southernness. And I think to the extent it worked, I hope because it was authentic, right? I happen to be from the South. I happen to feel for developing countries and vulnerable communities in environment. And for 30 years, my work has been that this climate change, in particular, environment in general, affects those who cause it least. And that is the justice issue that comes not because one sets out to disrupt something, but simply because one sees a reality and just keeps at it for a while. So sorry to go that route, but this point about, are we disrupting for the sake of disruption, or does disruption happen because there is something that needs to be righted, to be fixed? And I think it's much more effective if it's the later.
It's the latter. Great. No, thank you so much for that very different approach to the word disruption. But our next speaker, I believe, is a disruptor. It's an accidental one, but she is. Sadaf, you served 2 terms as mayor of a municipality in New Jersey as the first South Asian Muslim woman. After that, you also became part of the Assembly, the New Jersey legislature of the 16th district, and did amazing work on mental health and female reproductive health there. However, in that role, you did suffer and was subject to relentless Islamophobic and racist attacks. And at that point, you did have to step down. Looking back now, what lessons actually did you learn from that time? And for all young Muslim, Pakistani, South Asian men and women who want to go down the path of political office, but given what we've just seen with Zohran Mamdani's election as well and the resurgence of Islamophobia, what advice would you give them to be able to withstand that or overcome it?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me? I will wear the title of disruptor proudly. I've always been a bit of a troublemaker. My friends who are here, who were students with me at Georgetown, I went here for undergrad, so it's wonderful to be back, might agree with that as well. I think as a student here, I was in the School of Foreign Service. There might be some students here who are in that school. And I always thought that I was going to work in government. So I was interested in being a diplomat, and I interned at the State Department. I interned with the Marine Corps. But my classes here got me so interested in Islamic history and Muslim societies. And I was so inspired by my professors that I actually ended up doing a PhD and thinking that academia was going to be the path for me. And yet that interest in public service always stayed. And when I moved to New Jersey, to Princeton, where both my husband and I teach, that was the first time that I, as a Democrat, lived in a place that had a completely Republican local government, completely Republican county government, Republican congressman, Republican governor, and I didn't really feel like I fit. And so I actually was asked to run for local office because the Republicans in my town were running unopposed. It was that red of a town. And so I ran in 2016 as a write-in. I did not win. And then in 2017, I ran on the ballot and I won. And I was the first and only Democrat in several years. In 2019, I became the mayor. And in 2020, we took over all 5 seats of the local government. And so, thank you. It was a lot of hard work. But I think that what that story kind of illustrates is that there's always potential for change. Sometimes, for example, in electoral maps, people will say, oh, this is a red place, this is a blue place. And I used to go on, for example, a radio show and they would say, oh, you're just running as a symbolic thing. There's no way you can win in a town like that. And I said, no, I've looked at the data and I think that I respect the voters too much to think that they are just set in their ways. They just want someone who will give them the best message. And of course, we've seen that with Zohran's election as well, that he was polling at 1%, 2% name recognition, and then that just skyrocketed because I think we all agree. He's extremely compelling. He's a brilliant man. He has great ideas, and that spoke to the public, and he built a very strong coalition.
And he was authentic, just like Adil Najm just said, yeah.
Yes. And so I think for students or for young people or for people of all ages who are interested in getting into politics, I would say the biggest problem, the biggest roadblock in our politics today is a lack of imagination, that people just think things are the way they are and they can never change. But when you do things creatively, you can change things, and dramatically. And so I think there is a lot of hope. For me, yes, it got to be a situation that I didn't want to be in anymore. And for the sake of my family's well-being, I decided to step back. But I think that's also a message about politics. You can be a physician and go into politics for a few years. You can be an engineer and go into politics for a few years. We need people with all sorts of backgrounds in politics. And no shade on the attorneys, but there's way too many of them in government. We need people who have diverse perspectives because we're making legislation and laws that govern everyone's lives. And so even for those who have a background in the humanities, we need you in government. Education, we need you in government. So I hope, that shares a little bit about my background and what I would share with those who are interested.
Thank you so much. Those are really powerful lessons on resilience in elected office. Seher, you have faced a different battlefield, and that's in the newsrooms, right? So you've had an incredible journey in journalism, from launching Dawn News in Pakistan to editing at Vice World News, which is super impressive. That's quite a range. You have worked in some of the most influential newsrooms, also digital media platforms, and you're doing this at a time of algorithmic suppression, advertiser boycotts, and all kinds of censorship. So could you talk a little bit about, and especially when it comes to stories about US foreign policy, Muslim communities, Palestine, so could you talk a little bit about how you have navigated this as a Pakistani journalist whose main mission really is to amplify marginalized voices?
Thank you for that. Can you hear me at the back? Great. Hold it from the top. Okay, great. Thank you. It's interesting being back in DC because my first job in media was in DC right out of college. I worked at a small nonprofit here in 2004, and I quit that job because of censorship. I produced a radio program on US-Saudi relations. I spent months working on it, and my editor at the top suddenly decided to frame it from an Orientalist and Islamophobic lens. I said, this is unacceptable to me, and I quit the job. So my first jobs in journalism, my first 2 jobs, I quit because of censorship. So this has been the industry from the get-go. And I think this is a misunderstanding that a lot of people have about journalism, that they think it's gotten worse now. It was always existed. For our stories, there was always been censorship. There's been censorship for our stories, and there's been censorship around advertising dollars and advertising rupees. My second job was at Geo. I quit that job because I was working for 6 months on a documentary on the pharmaceutical industry, the dark side of the pharmaceutical industry. And the documentary was specifically about how these big pharma companies avoid regulation laws. As soon as the promo started going on air, we started getting calls from all these states, and then the director news pulled the documentary, quit that job. Since then, I've really, really focused on when I'm entering a newsroom, I want them to know that I am a child of empire and I embrace that identity. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm going to be working in the structures that they think are appropriate. I believe we're all children of empire. I don't consider myself a disruptor. I think that my great-grandparents were disruptors. I think my grandparents were disruptors, the folks who went through partition. I think that my parents' generation, they were carrying a lot of generational trauma from being post-colonial and seeing what their parents and what their grandparents went through, and they wanted to go for safety. So many of them became capitalists. But I don't think that's our origin story. I think that most of us come from resistance, and most of us come from anti-imperialism. It's just that we've forgotten our original stories. And for me, also in my journalism journey, it's been about me finding that path. When I started college, it was 2000. A year into college, I was an architecture student. 9/11 happened. 1 week, I was taking studios. I was going to become an architect, and I dropped out of architecture school. And I was like, the world is not making sense. I don't understand the news. I was born in Long Island, New York, but I moved to Pakistan at the age of 9, so I kind of knew both worlds. I saw democracy very young and new in the 90s in Pakistan, and I saw how flawed and broken it was. And I also saw military dictatorship. Like, I was literally driving back from after school classes when I saw these Fauji soldiers climbing the walls of PTV. And I came home and I was like, I saw that. Was that like a training happening? This is the year 2000. And then there was nothing on TV because there was no independent media. Then after a few hours, CNN started showing we had a coup. So that was what media was in the year 2000. And so in DC, when I was censored for the Saudi story that was like, and I'll tell you exactly what the Orientalism and Islamophobia was. The ad for that, for the program, the visualization was, I suggested we use an oil rig, because I think that is the definition of US-Saudi relations. It's the definition of what it was 20 years ago. It's the definition of what it is right now. But my boss wanted to use an image of the Kaaba, and that was unacceptable to me. And then he suggested using a picture of women in burqas. Again, unacceptable for me. So that's how it was 20 years ago. And when I was at Vice, I really focused on covering climate change, because in the 20 years that I've been in this field, what I noticed in Pakistan was, yes, we have this incredibly difficult relationship with democracy, and the military is in charge. And now the military has really, with the 27th Amendment, if folks have not been following it, they are supreme now, they're unaccountable. And so martial law is pretty much in the Constitution now. But the other big problem is climate change, because Pakistan is home to the most glaciers outside the Arctic. We have more than 7,000 glaciers, and those are melting. The number of glacial lakes which can overflow, which is a part of the reason why we have all this flooding, has gone up 25% in the 20 years that I've been a journalist. So climate change has been a big reality, and it's a big part of empire as well, because the whole idea is that if the world is being governed by these larger forces who are concentrating power and concentrating resources, being extractive from the global south, and we keep on participating in that, then how are we fighting the bigger picture? And so for me, my journey has been, how can we create little disruptions within empire? And alongside journalism, one of the works that I'm doing right now is, I'm based in California, and I've been working on a project that specifically fights against censorship in classrooms related to empire and Palestine and terms like colonial settlerism, which there are powerful groups that are trying to have that language banned out of classrooms. And so California is a really interesting state. It's like the biggest economy in the US. It usually votes blue. But there are interesting things that are happening there politically. It's the first state to pass a legislation that essentially will censor the mention of Palestine and perhaps colonialism in classrooms. This just passed a few weeks ago. And so the battlefield for us in California is very unique. And I think that this is where empire is going right now. What we're seeing is, so the last panel, someone said, this is the beauty of capitalism. And I genuinely do not believe that. And I know our panel title is Developing Human Capital. I think that human beings are more than capital, and that is someone who has a degree in economics and political science. I don't believe that our ability should be defined by our productivity. And we are more than capital. We can reimagine new futures. And I do think that we're in a very interesting time right now. The US is not going to be the hegemon much longer. In 2050, it's going to be China. And Pakistan lives right next to India, which is going to be right after China in 2050. So we are living in interesting times with identities from Pakistan and living in dying empire. And it's an interesting place to figure out how to be a disruptor.
Absolutely. And comes with a lot of risk. And thank you so much for taking those risks. And we'll come back to that as well in terms of censorship and what our academics have been also experiencing within the classroom. But I'd like to now turn to Shazmina, who I actually met when she was working at Congresswoman Pramila Jaipal's office, and we'll sort of talk more about her work there. But Shazmina, you've also, as a very young Muslim woman, entered congressional public space, with your very open and visible Muslim identity. You wear the hijab. And I'm just wondering whether you have ever experienced the kind of Islamophobia that perhaps Sadaf have experienced, but also the fact that you're so open about your Muslim identity. How does that impact the way constituents, leadership, congressional staff view you and Muslim representation in Congress? And was there ever a time where you felt like your Muslim identity opened doors in terms of representation or putting forward marginalized voices, or even if it became an unexpected barrier to that?
Well, thank you so much for that question, Mahlika. And I also just wanted to start off by saying how humbled I feel to be on this panel, because I am so young. And when you use the word disruptor, and I think you used the word trailblazers in the beginning, I think the three people sitting next to me are the ones that are the real trailblazers and have honestly held the torch high and paved the path for people like myself to be able to even work in the space that I do. So I want to thank you guys for your work, and I'm excited to hear more about it as the panel goes on. I think the first thing I will say, I think when you're visibly Muslim, visibly Pakistani, visibly anything other than, what the dominant race is in the country, I think your identity walks into the room before you do. And I think that's always been the case with me, whether that's been in Congress, whether that's been in class, whether that's been, at a conference, whatever it might be. But I think that for myself, at least, it shows that there's a lot of responsibility that I hold, but there's also a ton of opportunity that comes with it. So specifically, I would say in Congress, Muslim Americans and, American Pakistanis have often been seen through a very security and national security lens, right? And they're often discussed. And when they're discussed, it's often discussed, as you know, post 9/11, with an aura of suspicion, curiosity, but also just generally a lot of confusion, What I would say is I think I have felt, at least, that my presence in a lot of the rooms that I have been in, and specifically working, for Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, a South Asian woman, in many ways has disrupted that narrative. Not because I think my identity is transformative. I don't think that it is. I think it's more so because it allows people, constituents, other leaders, staffers, and members of Congress to not just see Muslims as abstractions in policy, things to just be discussed, but people that are within the room, also helpful in making the discussions, other staffers, and people that you can lean on to honestly, in many ways, gauge policy through a more contextual lens than maybe your peers would be able to. In terms of, I think the one thing I have learned in my space, because I am so young and, visibly Muslim, is that you can't fight all assumptions, and I don't think you should try to. I don't try to go into every room, paranoid about what other people might already think about me. So much of the time, you're with Republicans, you're with Democrats, you're with members of Congress who have actively called for the deportation of Muslims. You're with people who are very opposed to your identity, very opposed to your race and what your beliefs and values are, right? And I think if you go into every single room super cognizant of that, but also stressed about it and trying to change it, you're honestly going to limit yourself in what you're capable of achieving. So yes, so many of the times when I take meetings with, constituents, or I meet with other staffers, or I meet with other members of Congress, or we're hosting, let's say, an ambassador or someone, I'm very cognizant of the fact that there is more of a burden on me to, hold myself to a standard that maybe my other staffers wouldn't be held to, just because of the baggage that might come with what Muslim Americans are perceived to be in the United States. But I also engage in those conversations with people, knowing that although this might be a barrier to someone's understanding of me, one conversation can very quickly change that, you know? And I have felt that way. I have, sat across from people, on the opposite political aisle as me. We have sat down, discussed policy when we're writing bills and letters, and people are very candid, Sometimes people will just straight up ask me, they'll ask me like, why do you wear the hijab? I mean, I don't understand why in countries, let's say we're discussing a bill that has to even do with Pakistan, I don't understand why women cover there, isn't it something that's a bit burdensome, something that, you might feel is oppressive? And these are staffers, by the way, that I work with. And you have a choice you make in that situation. You can either describe why it is that, you do what you do, or you can retreat in your identity. You can concede. You can say, yeah, like I see where you're coming from, actually. Or you can stand there and say, no, this is something I don't agree with, politely, and explain to them why you are coming from the background that you do. And sometimes people are not going to walk away out of that discussion changing their minds, and that's fine. You don't have to change everyone's mind. But sometimes if you do, that will then go influence how that staffer then speaks to their congresswoman or congressman about policy in the Middle East, in Pakistan, in Muslim majority country areas, right? So it's small things like that. I think conversation changes a lot. In terms of I think over Islamophobia I've experienced, I wouldn't say there's been anything too bad, honestly. I think when you keep your chin held up high, people are also a bit nervous to come and approach you in a very overt way. I will say, I've had instances where constituents will meet with me and sometimes they'll think that I'm a part of some advocacy group and not actually a staffer. And I think that comes, with a lot of assumptions made about the fact that Muslim Americans don't occupy these sorts of spaces or don't belong in these areas. But it's a quick correction that you can make, and then they go back with a different understanding of who can be in these rooms, right?
Right.
So I think that's what I would say, but I think it's really important if you're Muslim, if you're Pakistani, whatever, to not other yourself automatically.
Absolutely.
Everybody else might see you that way, but if you internalize that too much, I think it will limit the contributions you are able to make in your space.
And thank you for being so willing to speak out and continuing to educate. Because 24 years after 9/11, I mean, right after 9/11, there were lots of these questions and we constantly felt the need to educate the larger public. But the fact that we're still having to do that and are still not completely fatigued in that process says a lot. So thank you. I will just say one thing. Yesterday, I was on Capitol Hill doing some congressional advocacy and we found a Pakistani cafe in the Rayburn building.
Yeah.
And when we went over there, they said, this is your only halal spot in Congress. So I think we've come a long way. And I thought perhaps Shazmina had something to do with that. But so we had some wonderful Milli Julie cardamom chai, which was really good. So with that, I am now going to sort of shift gears just a little bit, and perhaps we can go through this round a little bit more quickly, even though this is super important, because now we're going to talk about your dual identities as Pakistani Americans and being part of the Pakistani diaspora. So Adil, you wear multiple hats. You are also an international relations scholar, and you have analyzed US-Pakistan relations for decades. And I remember the first time we met, Pervez Musharraf was in power. That sort of dates both of us. But, and we were talking about how do we do conferences in Pakistan and about education policy and health policy and things like that. And what we didn't talk about at the time was the fact that 2 years earlier, he had staged a military coup. Because at that time, those coups were so normalized that we didn't really talk about it so much. Currently, Pakistan is going through this period of military authoritarianism like we've never seen before, right? The military leadership that we just saw with the 27th Amendment completely consolidated its power with the help of the civilian government, which we all know came to power through a fraudulent election. And now the judiciary has been completely gutted. It already was, but it is now completely gutted.
and the parliament is completely not legitimate. So when there are so many human rights violations taking place, and when you talk about US policy towards Pakistan, I'm wondering, how do you see your role as part of the Pakistani diaspora being somewhat distant from being on the ground in Pakistan and do have that level of protection? How do you see your role in speaking out about this and trying to push for a US policy that is more democracy and human rights centered and that does not prioritize military cooperation over democratic accountability?
Wow. That's a great question. I guess when someone says it's a great question, that means they have no idea how to answer it. And I don't. Malika, there are lots of things packed in that. I'm not sure that works as a short question. It's more of a statement, but that's fine. My worry with the thing is, I would love to, the two countries I have an affiliation with, one I'm a resident of, the other I'm a citizen of, are both going through troubling times. I would like to push for democracy in the US and the human rights in the US and democracy in Pakistan and human rights in Pakistan. But I do actually question your premise that this is the darkest time. You are younger, so you have been shielded. We have in both these countries seen dark times, and that is what gives me hope that dark times do end. I think what we've seen in Pakistan in the last 10 years is extremely troubling. The civil war we are living through in this country. As someone who has grown to love this country, I'm not a citizen. I should mention. So if the premise is I'm a Pakistani, right? So my stakes are very clear. Yeah.
I'm not a citizen.
No, I am. No, but I am. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. But some of our presumptions are also, right? So I see myself, my job as a scholar is to be the best scholar I can try to be. It is not to be a Muslim scholar. It is not to be a Pakistani scholar, right? I think we get into trouble, not twice, but with our own honesty when we make those things more prevalent. I would, if you allow me, I also don't want to presume that someone else's burdens are less than mine. Right? When we talk about censorship and stuff, I don't know if Hamid Saab is here, Hamid Mir or not. I think he may be the only other one who would remember this. I started my life as a working journalist. I didn't start my life, but for a while I was a working journalist in a newspaper called The Muslim. This will be relevant to your question in a minute. This was when censorship actually meant taking the newspaper. So I was Mushahid Saab, I was in college and I used to do cricket and numbers. So I wasn't doing political reporting. I was literally in 12th grade. But you had to do the paper and then take it to Rawalpindi where someone would see it and they would say, you take this stuff out. So you've got it easy, like you. Yeah. But yeah. So I remember twice I had to sort of go there and they would then take it off. And we had this wonderful gentleman, YL, who was the cartoonist at The Muslim. And The Muslim was the first newspaper that started not putting something in place of that, right? So I still have a copy of this one newspaper where the front page was all empty. And the so-called democratic governments, right, including the current or the last one, have been terrible. So anyhow, I don't want to make this a political thing. I want to come to your question about the disruption part. The disruption part is that I really do take my cue from Mia Muhammad Bakhsh. I honestly do. Mali da kam pani dena, bhar bhar mashka pave, mola da kam phal phulana lave ya na lave. Right? My job is to do the best at what I am supposed to do. And if I do it honestly, then it will work. If you allow me just one, and as you said, I am the oldest on the panel. I was literally teaching when 9/11 happened. Right? Two students, I was then also teaching at Boston University. This is before I'd moved to Fletcher. And two Boston University students had died in that. I remember I was shaving to get ready to go to work to teach when 9/11 happened, and I saw it on the plane. And my wife is here; she will tell you I literally hit the wall and said, "I wish it's not a Muslim," and that mark stayed until we sold that home. But here's the thing: for about 100 young Americans who had just gone through the greatest trauma of their life, understanding what the hell was happening. I was literally the first Muslim, and supposedly a Muslim in authority because I was in front of a class, that they had seen. I didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to deal with it. Right? These are kids. These are 20-year-old kids. They had anger. I had anger. Right? The reason I'm saying that is I don't know whether I dealt with it well. I don't know if I dealt with it badly. What I do know is that my responsibility at that point, far more than whether I'm Muslim or a Pakistani or anything else, is I am a teacher, these are kids, and my responsibility is to help them understand the world they are in. And that world is falling apart. And my responsibility is a responsibility of empathy as a human being, well before it is a responsibility of identity or anything. I honestly think that this is extremely important to understand when we balkanize ourselves in the limitations of particular identities. The dishonesty in my world as a scholar or in yours as a journalist and so on and so forth is when I let my opinions cloud my analysis. Right? So I teach, as you said, international affairs. I was founding dean of a school of international affairs. My job is to teach, analyze as best as I can. Not as someone who was born in Pakistan or is a Pakistani, not as someone who lives in the US. If they start clouding what I'm doing, I'm dishonest to my work. And I do think that is a very, very serious problem.
Absolutely. And you've been an incredible academic and has gotten so many teaching awards. And so I think what you're basically saying is that academia comes first, that kind of analysis, although you have been, you have shared your opinions on Pakistan-US relations with Pakistani media outlets. And I'm sure only because of a constraint of time, I'm not going to push back and say what more your role could be. And perhaps some of the people in the audience could ask that question, but I am going to move forward just so that we can keep going. So Sadaf, you teach at Princeton, and that has been ground zero for a lot of doxing, a lot of targeting of pro-Palestinian students, people who've been active in that. So I'd love to ask you sort of like a two-pronged, not necessarily related question, because you have been a big disruptor in trying to sort of counter that censorship on campus. And also separately, you've done a lot of research on the Aurat March in Pakistan, sort of given your South Asian identity and everything. And I'm wondering how you see your role as a South Asian woman here in part of the diaspora and what you can do to advance democratic reforms and women's participation in Pakistan.
Thanks so much for that question. I think, can you hear me? Yeah. I think in one word, the answer to that question is really solidarity. Building solidarities, expressing solidarity. I often, especially when I was an elected official and I was interviewed by Pakistani American media, for example, or Pakistani media, I would be asked, okay, well, what's your message to women in Pakistan? And I always said, I just stand in solidarity with them. They know their issues much better than I do. I absolutely, of course, stand in solidarity with the Aurat March movement and all of their demands and their agendas. They know the situation on the ground. And I think as an academic, my role has really been to bring those primary sources to my students. And so as well, if they might come to me saying, and I have gotten this, that, Malala is the first person or only person to be advocating for women's education in Pakistan. I'll be like, wait a second, there's some other women that you should know about. You should hear about this movement. You should see their speeches and their agendas. So I think for those of us who can, a lot of times it's just bringing people's attention to the activists in the region, in Pakistan itself, and those doing the work there. When it comes to censorship on campuses or anywhere in the world, again, I think it's all about solidarity. And when you build those solidarities, you're much more able to be strong in the face of it. And I'll give the example of, there is an advocacy organization called Impact, which its longer name is Indian American Impact, but they do endorse candidates and they work on getting candidates elected who are South Asian more broadly. So I was endorsed by them when I ran for office. And then I ended up working on a panel where we could have minorities, whether it was the Indian American Muslim Council, the Ahmadi community in representatives from Pakistan, whether it was a Sikh community, representatives from India. And so we could show that it's not that we're only concerned about Muslims in India. We're concerned about the rights of minorities across the board. And similarly with free speech, we need to understand and accept free speech across the board. And a lot of people have not been showing consistency in that. So on the right, they wanted the right to have people to come to campus who might say things that others would find offensive because we consider them racist or misogynistic or whatnot. But when it comes to the issue of Palestine, suddenly you can't say anything. And so again, what I would try to bring attention to is that in the encampments, it's not that it was a Muslim versus Jewish issue. The encampments were actually disproportionately representative with Jewish students. And at Princeton, for example, they had Shabbat services. And I think that was very common in encampments across the country. And in our advocacy for free speech in New Jersey, like in many other states, there's legislation proposed to get the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, which equates criticism of Israeli policy with anti-Semitism on the books. And so we've built a very strong coalition of Muslim groups, Palestinian groups, Jewish groups, the ACLU, and educators across the board to say that we don't want this. So far we've been able to stave it off, but we'll see what happens in the future. So again, I think in all of these arenas, it's really about moral consistency and not, saying there's one thing for me, something else for you, and also building solidarity that makes us much, much stronger.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm just going to keep on going just because we do have little time left. Sahar, just really quickly, you have straddled both media ecosystems, both in Pakistan and over here. And right now in Pakistan, it's been that way for many, many years and across governments in Pakistan. Absolutely, that's right. How do you, again, see your role in trying to sort of advance the conversation around media restrictions, the enforced disappearances of journalists, their abductions, their intimidation, harassment? Right now, I think according to most watchdogs who study media and journalism, they believe Pakistan is one of the most dangerous countries for journalists. So how do you see your role here as part of the Pakistani diaspora in changing the conversation back home?
Well, I'm not exactly a part of the Pakistani diaspora because my whole family lives in Pakistan. So there's only so much I can say without getting into trouble. And I do run an Instagram account called 2030 Mama, and I'm always getting messages on it. Don't say this, Sahar, don't say that. And I also always get messages also from another group, even though I've moved out of Pakistan 2 years ago. So when I left Pakistan in 2023, it was very clear to me that I could no longer do journalism there. So I left with that intention. And last year, we all have big families. We've all been impacted by the repression. My first cousin was picked up. And before I even knew he was picked up, and he is not political at all, but he is related to someone who is in politics, I got a message from them saying, whatever, and I ignored the message. Then I got another message, and that's how, when you're outside Pakistan, you can ignore the messages, and then you hope enough time passes that when you land up at the airport and when you go to visit your family, they don't show up to bother you. And so it's high-risk behavior. There isn't much that anyone who has family in Pakistan can do because it's really bad. And if you don't know it's really bad and you think it's conspiracy theory, that's not true. It is actually pretty awful.
And just the fact that our First Amendment rights here as Pakistani Americans are being infringed upon, that we have to self-censor because of our linkages back home, because so that our families aren't threatened back home, just says a lot about the kind of transnational repression that is happening by the Pakistani regime.
Yeah, just wanted to piggyback off of that. It's not just Pakistani Americans. Palestinian Americans are left in jail, Israeli jail, for just being picked up at the West Bank. And so there are cases of that. So
absolutely.
the US administration, whether it was this one or the last one, whether they stand up for Americans with hyphen identities is a question to be answered. Whether it's a part of the Constitution or not, what we're seeing actually is that it isn't. And you know, I do want to come back to Dr. Najam's point about identity politics, and I agree. Like, you know, identity politics is a complicated thing, and it should not be our defining goal, but solidarity is. And so for me, it's not just that I'm Pakistani, injustices. It's not just that I'm Pakistani or Muslim, it's just that it's because I come from ancestors that face these struggles, and we continue to face these struggles. So if most of the world is facing these struggles, but the people in power are not paying attention to us, then maybe we need to reconfigure.
Absolutely.
And the big change, thank you. The big change that we're seeing in the US is most kids in K-12 in classrooms right now are not white. We are the majority, but we do not have power. Most voters next year, the new voters that are going to be coming in, are also not white. The reason why there's been such a pushback on us in universities and classrooms, in everything, in media, is because we are no longer the minority when we think of ourselves in terms of solidarity. Thank you.
For pointing that out. The organizers have come up twice now saying that we're very short on time. Shazmina, I'm going to ask you to, within a minute, sorry about that, if you could just sort of talk about your work, working with Congresswoman Jaipal and what you've done for Pakistani human rights. That would be lovely. Maybe start with the TNR letter.
Start with that. I'm going to start with the letter that Mehlaka so graciously helped our office with. So we basically, I think that being in the office and being Pakistani means that it gives you a different vantage point when you're talking about Pakistan, you know, in an area that is so dominated by, I think, non-South Asian men who often just talk about Pakistan through the security complex. So they talk about it through military cooperation, defense cooperation, crisis management. Actually being Pakistani, I think, is quite refreshing because we understand that we should not be seeing Pakistan and the US's, you know, relationship through just that lens. It's a country of 250 million people. There are real lives at stake, lives, you know, Americans who care about what's going on abroad. That doesn't have to do with just security, right? So the letter that my congresswoman, my boss, my former boss, Pramila Jayapal, introduced was about transnational repression and democratic backsliding in Pakistan. And it specifically called out, you know, the current military establishment and government and how they've basically been perpetuating a lot of what, you know, the human rights abuses that we see, the, you know, democratic, you know, assault on, you know, the judiciary and situations like that. And the letter kind of asks for accountability, asks for asset freezes, asks for the State Department to basically, and the White House, to take a greater role in really assessing what this partnership with Pakistan is, what it looks like, and if it is fundamentally upholding, you know, what we Americans champion as the values that we want with the partners we work with abroad. I think I just want to add one more thing, and I think it's because of what Sahar said about, you know, the Palestinian community. I think whether you're Pakistani, you're Muslim, whatever it is, you have to really recognize, especially in the policymaking space, that the work you're doing is incredibly intersectional. So if you're only uplifting your own community, you're not doing enough, you know, and you need to be doing more because that's the way you build. We've been talking about solidarity. That's how you build solidarity. People don't want to work with you if you're not doing that. So, you know, in my office, we introduced joint resolutions of disapproval towards Israel to block arms sales to Israel. We also introduced the Gaza humanitarian aid bill, which basically was signed on by over 100 members of Congress when the starvation campaign was happening to make sure that humanitarian aid can get in there. So it's just a couple instances of those who do want to go into the policy world to know that the work you're doing should always kind of, you know, make sense and align with your values, but also make sure that it's impacting communities that go beyond just your own.
Such an important point, intersectionality and solidarity across coalitions. So thank you all so much. I am just so inspired by this incredible panel. We do have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. So if anybody wants to just stand up at the mic, ask a very brief question. and we'll try and get to as many as we can.
Hello.
And please address it to whomever you're asking the question
My
to.
question is actually from all of you, including the moderator. I think we all know that unity among disruptors is not just important, but it is decisive. You guys mentioned about solidarity. It is important, but when individual disruptors unite, their influence becomes systemic. I want to bring attention to an important disruptor topic that has been largely overlooked. I'm from Balochistan. And the kind of disruption taking place there, led by figures like Dr. Maharang Baloch, who challenged extrajudicial killings, military authoritarianism, is something many other parts of Pakistan fair speak to about. However, we know the consequences, but in my point of view, the core reason is that the fragmentation of the disruptor voices across the country often overlook the systemic impact. So my question here is like, how can disruptors in Pakistan can unite, and how can their collective overflow strengthen the fragmented system? Thank you.
Lovely, thank you so much. We'll just take a few together, yeah.
Zafar Iqbal from Toronto, Canada. I have a question and a comment. My comment is...
Just a question, please. Just a question, thank you.
Okay, the question is, what do we do as the elder to empower our youths to excel from what you have done, to build the foundation? Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions? We're done? Okay, excellent. Sahar, you wanted to take the Balochistan question?
I'm gonna take the Balochistan question, but do you want to summarize what she said? Because a lot was said out.
Yes, I think she was talking about the enforced disappearances, the extrajudicial killings, and how disruptors in Pakistan, I believe, can do more and address that.
Okay, so if I was to say who is the biggest disruptor in Pakistan, it is Dr. Maharang Baloch. Let's be very clear that within Pakistan, any movements that are being clamped down upon extrajudicially or through judicial processes, it's the hardest things that we're going through, and it's really hard for journalists inside the country it's always been hard to report on enforced disappearances. We have Hamid Mir here, who was shot at after during the march across Pakistan. So the real speaking up about Balochistan, reporting on Balochistan have always existed, but despite all that, despite all types that have been created in Pakistan, how the Baloch people are, one of the terms that the media likes to use, that they're backward people. Despite that, someone like Maharang Baloch was leading crowds. Now she's in jail. And so what we can do on the outside, we keep saying her name, and we also stopped saying the name at this conference because Wajahat told me to wrap up. But in your individual capacity, know who she is, look her up, Google her, watch her videos.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Dr. Maharang Baloch is awesome. Okay, so for the youth question, I think I'm going to turn to, Sadaf wants to answer, and I think Adil also wants to answer. Almost 70% of Pakistan's youth is under the age of 30, and so how do we empower them?
Before you start, we have to wrap up. Lunch is almost served. So keep it youthful and tight, the answer. Thank you.
So I'll just speak very, very quickly about the Pakistani American community is invest in political organizing and participating in the political process. Our community is very generous. We donate a lot to humanitarian causes, but the only way we can truly make a difference is if we have those voices in politics and government. And it's not something dirty. It's the only way to really make life better for millions of people here and billions of people around the world because of the power of this government. So please invest, please get involved.
Okay. So I'm sorry, just small editorial. I again caution, do not fetishize disruption too much. I wish Maharang was the biggest disruptor. The establishment is the biggest disruptor. In just absolute on the ground. In this country, the biggest disruptor is Donald Trump. It is Elon Musk. I'm not saying this from one side or the other. I'm saying if we're going to use words, let's use them right. Disruption is not always a good thing, right? So we should be careful about what we want and why we want it, and that is where analysis comes. Very briefly on the old young people. Sir, get out of the way. That's my advice to myself, right? Get out of the way, meaning cheer them when they run, console them when they fall, but for God's sake, let them do their thing.
Thank you all so much. I will just say, however we want to interpret the word disruptor and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, guys, this is the moment to be troublemakers. We all have that right. We all have that obligation. And I will just say, in terms of what happened to Chagra Saab, who was not able to come to this conference because of military authoritarianism, I hope that when we have the Pakistani ambassador later today coming to speak at this conference representing a very fascist regime, all the troublemakers over here are going to call him out. That is the least that we can do. Thank you.
Mariam. Mariam. All right. Well, thank you for that, Mariba. I think we've lost, thank you for that, Malika. I think we've lost Mariam's audio, so I'm going to fill in for Mariam. There she is.
If we could just present our token of appreciation for these panelists. Meanwhile, I just want to let everyone know that lunch is served, and we will also be having a research presentation from one of our Georgetown students, Amara, and we also have the research fair going on in the back. So while lunch is served, please be mindful that these people will be presenting their hard work and research. So please be sure to listen to them, and afterwards we'll be back with our lunch and learn.
Thank you. All right. So I just wanted to say real quickly, lunch is going to be around 30 or so minutes. That's not a Pakistani 30, that's an actual 30. Enjoy lunch. Our friends at Spice Circle, which is a fantastic place, have subsidized it for us. Check them out. It's a very desi lunch. And the live stream for our audiences who are watching this, the live stream will resume in a little bit. Thank you so much. You're on my way, sir. Thank you. That's okay. That's okay. It's your conference. Enjoy yourself. I'll see you guys in a bit.